This is the Village Parang from Condor Knife and Tool. My initial comments on this were not overly positive due to a number of issues with the blade profile and the grip. The biggest issues being that while it looked like this was ground for a significant portion of the blade's width, it was just a polish line and the grind only started right down by the bottom. The handle was also much too close to round and had a few other issues. Anyway, I was a bit curious if there was a knife buried somewhere inside this, so I did some modifications. I ground this down to a true flat. So this is essentially now a full grind to the height of this grind line. And that significantly increased not only the raw penetration, but it significantly reduces the shock and vibration. Because what it does, of course, is the higher the grind that you use, the more gradual the knife comes to a stop. A very thick, very abrupt grind comes to a stop almost immediately as it goes into the wood. And of course, the shorter it comes to a stop, or the faster, the more essentially deceleration the knife feels, and the more that you actually feel, because that's where the shock actually comes from, the knife coming to a sudden stop. But when you put a high taper on, that taper of course distributes that over a higher section of blade. So not only do you get greater penetration, you get a much more fluid, a much softer impact. I also took the handle and I ground down flats on the side of it, because in the beginning it was much too round and it would roll in the grip. So I just flattened out the handle. I then took a section of track tape and put it on just one side. Not the side where my fingertips are on, because that can be relatively abrasive and your fingertips are generally fairly sensitive. But I put it on the other side where the meat part of my hand is, and that's generally fairly tough, especially if you do work in the outside, because that's where most of your heavy contact comes. And that improved the grip. So I was sort of on my way to creating a functional tool. However, I wanted to check the durability, of course, of the edge, and I had ground it right down, and it just now has a very light convex taper right next to the very edge. So I did some heavy limbing and that was alright, and now I wanted to look at heavier impacts, so I was doing some splitting of wood, and essentially immediately the handle just fragmented. So pieces of it broke off from both sides. And it's one of the issues with wooden handles in general that leads people away to using more stable products such as micarta and G10. However, if you look at actual real village parangs, they don't tend to have this issue, and one of the reasons that they don't is because the blades are much more effective at handling vibration, so you don't get that large amount of shock being transmitted to the handle. And the reason that you don't is mainly from two effects. Number one, they will use a much more extensive taper. So this will be taper the full height of the blade. So again, you get a much more gradual force transfer to the blade. And the other thing that they do is that you don't see this full tang construction in general. This will be a tapered tang construction, and it will generally be annealed, and both of them essentially will help with sorting out the vibration and reducing it, which is why in general you can have wood handles that are very, very effective. And of course the other thing is you'll get splitting. See right around this pin, which is normally where it'll split, and of course you don't see this generally in native construction. You'll see basically a stick tang which is drove into a piece of wood, and you'll probably see a metal collar on top. And this wood again is absolutely bone dry. So I probably could have prevented this as well, or at least mitigated it somewhat, if I had gave this a really good sanding and then essentially soaked it in linseed oil for a while. But on the positive, I was really going to modify this handle at some point anyway, because there's far too much weight here down by the end of the handle. So now I'll just knock this handle off. I'll probably cut this bulb off at the end and taper this handle fully, and that will drive not only the center of balance way out on this blade, it'll also drive out essentially your impact node, the so-called sweet spot, which will be much further up towards the point. And what I'll end up with is a blade that feels lighter in hand when you pick it up, but it feels sort of heavier when you rotate it, so you get more of a power and a snap cut. So the cutting efficiency or power will go up, but the raw or sort of dead carrying weight will actually go down when those modifications are done. And of course, to compensate again somewhat for stripping the end weight off the end, I'll probably gut off a bunch of this metal up here, and again that will also reduce vibration, increase penetration, increase ease of sharpening, and pretty much anything else by putting a higher grind on the blade. So as a positive, it doesn't look like there's anything significantly wrong with the steel, and it can take a decently thin and decently low angled edge. So now I just got to make a decent handle for it.